It's July the 7th, and John and I are doing introduction to his latest Bad Axe County novel. And John, where are you at right now?
I'm high above the South Fork of the Bad Axe River. This is my writing spot. I have a camp out here, a camper beside the river. And in order to talk to you via Zoom, I'm up on the hill above the campground at a friend's house, looking down on the Bad Axe River. So it's a perfect place to talk about Bad Day Breaking, book 4 in the Bad Axe County series. Thanks for having me, Todd. This is exciting. It's always fun when a book comes out.
Oh yeah. I got a chance to read this earlier and just reread it recently and enjoy it even more. So just as an intro to this, Heidi Kick has been sheriff of Bad Axe County for several years. She's tireless, fearless, and is almost always working. She's dealt with a rural sex trafficking ring in the first book, Bad Axe County, white power radicals in book 2, Dead Man Dancing, a cannibal in the third book, Bad Moon Rising. And in this fourth installment, Bad Day Breaking, there's a faith-based prosperity group called the House of Shalah, which has taken up residence in a former self-storage business on Eustachit Road. A group of locals has been protesting their presence and called themselves Kill the Cult. As in all of the Bad Axe County novels, the author John Galligan always stirs the pot much more than a brief description can explain, and Bad Day Breaking is no exception. His cinematic prose keeps you riveted at the edge of your seat. The House of Shalah is led by the prophet, Father Uodu, and Mother Ruth. Their followers all have the surname of Carpenter. The most recent arrivals are Brother Milk, Brother Pete, Brother Skip, and Brother Spooner. Instead of working in the community and giving their paychecks to Father, they're doing security. No one knows why. With 2 of the carpenters gone missing, it feels like Jesus the Carpenter meets the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Duke Hashimoto, a retired ATF agent, is independently investigating the situation. He sees all the signs for another Waco, Texas, David Koresh tragedy. Heidi has 2 female underlings in the department that are acting suspiciously. Deputy Stonebreaker is the wife of the man who is leading the Killed Cult movement, and Deputy Luck may be having online relations with prison inmates. At home, Heidi's mother-in-law, Belle Kick, has moved into the family home with Heidi, her son Harley, and their 3 young children. She's a cantankerous wild card, and there's no telling who she'll cozy up to or compromise. But that's not quite enough. Heidi's old boyfriend from her wild days after her parents were murdered is out of prison on early release. He blames Heidi for his time behind bars and is stalking her with a vengeance. It's all a recipe for disaster just in time for the holidays. Throw in some weather and you've got a novel.
Oh, that was fantastic. I think we're done here.
Oh,
that was perfect.
Wait, how do you sleep? I mean, do any of these characters ever that you've created ever haunt you?
Yeah, a little bit, but not much. No, honestly, the one in this one, the guy that you mentioned, the ex-boyfriend out of prison stalking Heidi, that guy bothers me, and I kind of see him out of the corner of my eye here and there. In book 2, the character that comes in from the outside, Oklahoma Terry, that's another one that creeps me out. But no, I think part of my survival, as a novelist, is the ability to kind of compartmentalize the work and inhabit it as needed, and not really let it spill over too much into my life. But like you said, I mean, you just described a fairly complex narrative with a lot of characters, and so the whole idea of, does this impact my life? Yeah, sure. It's you got to keep your head in this space for a sustained period of time. I mean, basically a year or so. And I do wonder sometimes if, how that's shaping my worldview. So that's a good question. This particular book, one of the things that happens is as soon as I'm done, I start working on a new one.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to clear the queue and create a new set of heroes and monsters. So yeah,
Well, at least you control the narrative of your characters.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah, it's up to me what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any real life incidents that inspired Bad Day Breaking?
Well, certainly the whole history of religious cults, and I in particularly did pretty deep research on Heaven's Gate and on James Jones and the Jonestown massacre, and particularly on the Rajneesh phenomenon out in Oregon. There's a terrific documentary series called Wild Wild Country that lays all that out. And so I did a lot of research into cults. So that was one thing. And the actual real life adventure that spawned this whole thing was the pandemic. This book, I was composing it or starting to compose it in the summer of 2020.
Yeah.
So we were like 6 months into the pandemic, and like every writer who writes contemporary novels, I'm wondering, okay, what do I do? Do I pretend this isn't happening and just sort of write in a vacuum? But I was already too late for me to do that, because I've already incorporated, current trends and the zeitgeist and so forth into the previous novels. So I felt I couldn't completely ignore it like some writers have chosen to do. On the other hand, because when you start a book, it's not going to see the light of day for a year and a half. I also couldn't predict to what extent the pandemic was going to affect our lives.
Yeah.
Was it going to did I need to put everybody in a mask? Did I need to have a mass die off? All this stuff. I didn't want to get into that either. So what I tried to do, spurred by this major event in our lives, was think about the deeper psychic impact that was happening, and what that might do to people, and how people respond to this kind of threat, and how they respond to loss of livelihood, loss of family members, and so forth. And so this is how I settled on the idea of followers of a cult, that people were looking for this kind of guidance, and people that had lost essentially their financial present and future, being attracted to a prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
And so that's how I created the House of Shalah. So that the pandemic was the big current event that inspired it, and then the research about cults and so on. That was that documentary, Wild Wild Country, will blow your mind. I don't know if you've seen it, Todd, but
I haven't.
It's more than you can imagine, and how that could happen. The stuff that goes on in Bad Day Breaking is pretty tame compared to some of the things that the Rajneeshis were doing in Antelope, Oregon, back in I think it was the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have some empathy for some of the members of the House of Shalah in this, but several of them just creep me out. So,
well, they're troubled people, and in particular, you mentioned the new members.
Yeah.
For some reason, the prophet now feels he needs security, and it's unclear why he thinks he needs that, but he's got some projects in mind. He's got a scheme in mind, and he needs some heavies to come in and clear the way for him. And so there are these four men that appear and sort of take over. They actually push their way into the cult and take wives away from existing cult members, and begin to bully people and sort of carry out the prophet's new plan.
Yeah.
So those people are creepy, and they are taking advantage of, as is the prophet, of the vulnerability of damaged people that have lost loved ones, people that have lost their livelihood, their businesses, their savings.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, is there anything you're working on writing now that you'd like to talk about?
Well, that's a tricky one.
Is it too soon to talk about it?
It's a little too soon. I'm working on a new book. Let's say that. I'm pretty excited about it. Like I'm in the writing phase. That's the hardest for me, the most precarious, the scariest, the quitting. Why am I doing it to myself? And that's the phase where you're creating something out of nothing. You know, there's nothing there. There's no setting. There's no time of day. There's no weather. There's, you know, the roads don't have any names. The people don't have any names. And so I'm sort of building the infrastructure of something and taking all these chances. Half of what I'm writing right now might be thrown away. So I'm in the discovery phase. The something out of nothing phase of a new novel. And at the moment, today, I'm feeling good about it. Tomorrow could be another day, but I'll get there. You got to trust the process.
All right. Well, we're starting to have trouble with our connection, so I think I'm going to wrap this. So the book is Bad Day Breaking. It comes out on August 30th of this year. We'd love for you to pre-order it with us, and we will have John at the store for a book signing on September 3rd for a couple of hours. So keep an eye out for that. And thanks so much for joining us today, John. Looking forward to your visit.
Thanks, Todd. Great to see you.
Take care.